Known for her incredible amount of peel and her ability to enable hypercarries to carry entire games, Lulu is an excellent enchanter champion to pick up whether you're newer to the enchanter class archetype or you're a total veteran. She provides excellent peel, a flexible playstyle that rewards the Lulu player, and a very consistent kit that lets her have an incredible impact in every game. Here's a quick breakdown of how we'll be going over the video. I'll touch on general concepts of Lulu's champion identity and what success looks like in games that you are doing well in her. We'll then discuss different components of her kit and how we can work better to optimize each one of these. This includes going over different matchups, rune optimizations, ability maxing, your build, and how to play out each phase of the game. Let's start off with Lulu's rune setups and the variances they can have from game to game. As with most enchanters in the game, Lulu takes a relatively standard page that revolves around having Airy as her keystone of choice. Contributing to her poking trade patterns and enhancements to her supportive abilities, it's an overall very flexible rune that provides value no matter which situation she faces herself in. After that, Lulu will follow up this page typically with Mana Flow Band, Transcendence or Absolute Focus if you're feeling relatively safe in most fights, and Gathering Storm. Inspiration can be a decent second page for a more stable laning phase, with Cosmic Insight and Cookies being your take instead. I typically think a Resolve secondary is super strong though, and with the Conditioning Revitalize combo giving an incredible amount of bang for her buck. In volatile matchups where Lulu might struggle to survive in the early game, especially against engaged champions, she can swap up her runes to help adapt to that shift in priority. Lulu's goals in these matchups are not to do exceedingly well in top lane, but rather to mainly survive and allow herself to naturally outscale these opponents. With this in mind, Lulu takes a page driven by a Guardian Keystone so that she and her AD carry can hold down their own in the early phases. To go along with the Guardian Keystone, Lulu takes Fawn of Life, Bone Plating or Conditioning depending on how aggressive that matchup is, and Revitalize. For her secondary, she tends to take Sorcery in order to access runes like Mana Flow Band and Gathering Storm to still give her a high amount of resources in the later phases of the game. She can also opt for Inspiration again to access key runes like Cosmic Insight and Biscuits. For her adaptive runes, Lulu should generally take double Adaptive Force in either armor or magic resistance depending on the enemy bot lane composition. If kill threat is a major concern, she can also drop the Adaptive Force rune on the second row in favor of additional defenses. In terms of her build, Lulu happily embraces some of the most loved items from other enchanters. Moonstone and Shurelya's are going to be two of your favorite mythic items in most scenarios. For extremely long front to back fighting scenarios, Moonstone provide a ton of raw value that will be able to help stat checks most champions, whereas Shurelya's can be an excellent take in those faster scenarios where you might need that oomph of movement speed to either get fights or run away from a potential engage. In rare cases where you see the enemy team comp and you just know that they're going to engage really hard onto you, picking up Locket as your mythic is a rare but viable choice in those situations. For your mythic though, there will be a couple of things that you'll like to pick up. Your starting item will likely be Relic Shield in matchups where you feel like your safety is a priority, but in almost every other matchup, you'll be able to get away with Spell Thieves as your starting item. This typically just reflects the main differences you'll have in the way that you play out your laning phase, as Relic Shield affords you the ability to play from much further back, and prevents you from needing to extend out in positions where you might need to be vulnerable in lane. While working up to your components in your mythic, you'll typically be picking up tier 1 boots, as well as a Dark Seal in many cases thanks to its incredible gold efficiency. After your mythic, if you need to pick up Heal Cut, Chemtech Putrefier will pretty much be your immediate pickup in those situations. These days, we're in metas where your main DPS champions are very occupied with picking up their core items, so the duty has come to you to fill in that role of picking up the heal cut when your team needs it. If you're in a game where that isn't the case for whatever reason, then you can pick up varying support items depending on your team composition. Ardent Censer is a very common pickup as a second core item to continue to increase the effectiveness of your buffs on your primary carry. If that item doesn't seem like it will carry much impact, or if other items seem very important for your carry, items like Mikhail's or Redemption can be good pickups as your second item instead. After this point, you'll likely want to finish off your boots, which will likely be Lucids. After this point, you can pick up whatever combination of support items that generally feel haven't really addressed your needs already, which could be any combination of the above items I've already mentioned, or your Wardstone item, or even in some cases upgrading your Dark Seal into a Magi's. In terms of optimizing her ability usage, Lulu is one of those champions where she's honestly very simple on the surface, but she could take advantage of a lot of little tricks to make her abilities a lot easier to be consistent with. In terms of combos, she's relatively limited, but it's in these little optimizations where Lulu can become incredibly impactful in most fights she partakes in. So I'll quickly touch on each of these and why they collectively can contribute to upping your Lulu play. The first one to talk about, which I think makes a lot of her play much easier in a lot of situations, is self-casting. I personally bind this to ult plus the ability that I use, and it's great to have on a champ like Lulu because it means that you can cast 3 of your abilities on yourself without having to aim. A lot of your trading patterns or positioning in team fights will have you both worry about casting abilities on your allies, but also being able to quickly switch to an ability or two on yourself so that you can survive a fight. Self-casting allows you to do both of these relatively quickly, so it lets you relieve a lot of the load on your mousing hand in APM intensive team fights. Portrait casting is a similar version version of this where sometimes there's fights where there's a ton of going on and you find it hard to press your ability on the right target. This is hard, especially for a champion like Lulu, because a lot of your abilities will work on any target in the fight, so that just means that there are more targets for your abilities to be aimed incorrectly. Portrait casting occurs if you press your targetable ability on an ally's portrait on your teammate selection near the map. If you also happen to make your minimap absolutely massive like I do, it creates these relatively large areas on your screen that allow you to always be able to access your teammates when needed. Now onto a couple of specifics relating to Lulu's ability usage when it comes to fights and these applications. In lane, Lulu typically has a couple of trading patterns that she relies on depending on how the enemy trades. Overall, she loves to trade very short, but also has more DPS than the average enchanter thanks to picks increasing over her overall attack output. So she has a little bit of flexibility in being able to play both long and short trades. If she's looking for a very bursty trade, one of the fastest ones you can do is to simply auto attack and use your E offensively, then run away. This is great because it gives the enemy very little room to actually react to your trade, and this amount is already enough to net you a full 60 gold from spell thieves. An extended version of this trade is to run away after using your E on the enemy laner, and then hit a straight Q, since your Q also shoots a beam from the origin of whatever target your E is on. You can also use the same mindset to throw your E and Q on a wave in order to wave clear. Normally, as an enchanter, Lulu does not need to wave clear, as that would mainly be the job of her AD carry, but sometimes you'll need to blow your abilities on the wave in order to make sure it's in the right spot at the right time as well. The last version of your trade is more focused on playing the war of attrition, and is done when you're mainly looking to just farm gold off your spell thieves while reducing your exposure as much as possible. This is a little bit similar to the first trading pattern, but you basically shield yourself while you're autoing so that you can prevent any damage from occurring to yourself. This allows you to both apply damage for your spell thieves, but then keep your HP up if you need it for whatever reason. Now touching on matchups. In terms of Lulu's overall matchup spread, she kind of hits a balance between being able to minimize most of the weaknesses that other enchanters have, but then ironically becoming weak against those enchanters. By this, I mean she's one of the most blindable enchanter champions when it comes to facing engage or pick champions, but in return she doesn't have that great of a spread against other enchanters. Matchups in the champs like Nautilus or Leona are pretty playable for Lulu, but she has a very bad time against enchanters that you know she cannot punish. Sona, Soraka, Karma, all these enchanters give her a pretty hard time because Lulu's tools aren't able to keep these champions down. Ironically, against enchanters that are able to outvalue her, Lulu needs to play relatively aggressive in order to dominate lane and gain an advantage, or else she'll get outscaled. Against Karma specifically, it's a little bit different as it's Lulu's worst matchup in terms of enchanters in competitive play, and it's mainly because of the fact that she has so much trouble even reaching Karma with her abilities. Lulu does outscale though, so it's more so about playing the long game in this case. Against engaged champions, your main goal coming into laning phase is to not fight and win, but to treat survival as a win in itself. If you get over the early game kill threat that these champions present, then you will outvalue these champions and eventually you cannot be punished. In terms of team fighting, Lulu positions similarly to other enchanters as a backliner that boosts up important targets. She's inherently very squishy and should have that mindset when she goes for team fights. As with most other enchanters, she does not ever want to start engages really, and she loves the front to back. Be cognizant of this, use your abilities defensively to lengthen team fights as much as possible, and you'll eventually be able to stat check your opponents thanks to the incredible buffs that you give to your carries. You can use your ultimate either defensively to protect your important targets, or you can also use it to supplement an engage that's happening from a teammate. I'll also expand a bit on your polymorph and your hugify usage in fights. Although both of these tools are inherently very strong as is, it's important to take advantage of the fact that they can be used as disjoints against certain enemy champions as well. What I mean by this is that they can interrupt enemy combos or break the rhythms while they engage onto you, and you should be in fact doing this whenever possible. It basically harvests more value for the same ability in a sense, so you should actually hold them until those threats come up and you can disjoint them. So that's pretty much what I've got for Lulu. She's an awesome champion to learn and master, and in my books, she's probably one of the most fun enchanters to pick up. She's a very inviting champion with more depth than meets the eye, and is one that is very frustrating when piloted by the right player. As always, I hope this guy was insightful to you guys, and I will catch you in the next one. Stay fresh.